Good day everyone, I am Cavite Mutiny from BSBA FM 1A. The Cavite Mutiny, which took place on January 20, 1872, was a watershed moment in Philippine history. The main cause of the mutiny was Filipino soldiers and workers' dissatisfaction with the Spanish colonial government's treatment of them. Filipino soldiers served in the colonial army and were subjected to a variety of duties, including forced labor without pay. They too faced discrimination and were denied the same rights as Spanish soldiers. Furthermore, there was widespread belief among Filipino soldiers and workers that the Spanish government intended to restrict religious freedoms and abolish the traditional Filipino system of communal land ownership known as encomienda system. The uprising was sparked by these grievances, as well as the influence of Filipino nationalist and reformist ideas. Despite the fact that the mutiny was quickly put down by Spanish authorities, it had a significant impact on the development of Philippine nationalism and the fight for independence from Spanish colonial rule. The Cavite Mutiny was a pivotal event in Philippine history that has sparked much discussion and interpretation. Some argue that it was a failed and ill-planned rebellion with little popular support among Filipinos. Others see it as a watershed moment in the Philippine independence struggle, heralding the start of a more organized and sustained resistance to Spanish colonial rule. One argument in favor of the Cavite Mutiny's significance is that it demonstrated the Filipino people's growing awareness and political consciousness. The grievances of the Filipino soldiers and workers who led the mutiny extended beyond their personal circumstances to broader issues of social and economic inequality, as well as a desire for greater political representation and self-determination. Another argument for the mutiny's significance is that it sparked a wave of nationalist and reformist movements in the Philippines. The mutineers' ideas, especially their emphasis on the need for reform and modernization in Philippine society, aided in galvanizing the emerging Filipino nationalist movement and influencing subsequent generations of Filipino leaders. Some argue that the Cavite Mutiny was a premature and misguided rebellion because the Filipino people were not yet united in their desire for independence from Spanish colonial rule. Furthermore, the mutiny was quickly put down and many of its leaders were executed, potentially undermining the cause of Philippine independence in the short term. While the Cavite Mutiny had some limitations and flaws, its impact on Philippine history and the struggle for independence cannot be overlooked. It contributed to a renewed sense of political consciousness and inspired future generations of Filipino leaders who would lead the country to independence. The Cavite Mutiny, which took place on January 20, 1872, was a failed rebellion that failed to overthrow Spanish colonial rule in the Philippines. The mutiny was quickly suppressed by the Spanish authorities, and its leaders were executed, effectively ending the uprising. A small group of Filipino soldiers and workers who were dissatisfied with the Spanish colonial government made the decision to start the mutiny. They were convinced that the Spanish authorities intended to restrict the religious freedoms and to abolish the traditional Filipino system of communal land ownership known as the encomienda system. They also demanded better treatment and representation in the colonial government. The mutineers, on the other hand, did not have widespread support among the Filipino people, and the rebellion was poorly organized and equipped. The Spanish colonial forces quickly outnumbered and outgunned them, putting down the rebellion in a matter of days. The Spanish authorities responded to the mutiny by holding a series of trials and executions of the mutineers, which helped to put a stop to any further rebellions in the short term. The mutiny, however, had a significant impact on Philippine nationalism and the struggle for independence from Spanish colonial rule. Despite its failure, The Cavite Mutiny demonstrated the Filipino people's growing political consciousness and desire for change. It sparked a wave of nationalist and reformist movements in the Philippines, leading to the country's independence from Spanish colonial rule. Thank you.